Okay, we're live on YouTube.
Okay, it is 1:30 and we are going to start back with our afternoon session. And we have our water discussion with Ms. Rank of the Mancus Conservation District. Would you come on down?
So what is the best way to do that?
I'll take this all day long.
Well, thank you for having me here today. Do I just say next slide?
Yes, let me share my screen with Zoom before we do that.
Okay.
Give me just 1 second. Okay, and now you may say next slide.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here today. My name is Gretchen Rank. I've been the director for the Conservation District now for 7 years. Prior to that, I had an accounting and financial background. So conservation and ag infrastructure was not in my background, but have absolutely loved the last 7 years. I've had the opportunity to work with locals in Mancus. All right, next slide. I'm going to start just quickly with some different assessments and steps that led to the 2011 Mancus Watershed Plan, because a lot of the work that we've been accomplishing in the last 7 years has come out of that watershed plan. We do have a 319 impairment on the East Mancus River for high copper and selenium. Some of that is naturally occurring, and some of that is from mining. We were designated a salinity control area, and then also formed the Mancus Watershed Group in 2006, where a lot of partners within the Mancus Watershed came together to formulate the plan in 2011. One of the pieces of that watershed plan I'll speak on today was the 2010 Mcd Diversion Survey and Inventory. All right, next slide. The Mancus Watershed Plan recommendations really showed some critical issues within the watershed and specifically within the stream channel. We had a lot of push-up diversions that require at least annual rebuilding. You'll see the photo there. They do a really poor job of diverting in variable flows. If the flows are too high, they wash out, and they really cannot be rebuilt until the flows decrease. If the flows are too low, then they really just don't divert the water that they should. Annual rebuilding of these diversions was really time-consuming and expensive and disruptive to the riparian and the river channels. And a major portion really of the degradation that we saw within the watershed assessment happened at the current diversion sites. Right, next slide. Phase one, we decided to look at planning and design, looking at collecting field data, preparing initial drawings and designs, mapping the diversions on the Mancus River, and then looking at those in-stream project opportunities. The Conservation District also really recognized that it was going to take a significant amount of project management and took that role on with hiring employees, but then also the Board of Directors volunteered a lot of time for that. All right, next slide. Many of the ditch companies that had those concerns had members who were either active Conservation District board members or had served on our board in the past. They became very involved in the process for the proposed engineering of these diversion structures. They really had been the ones working the river for many generations, some of them, and so they really wanted to get in on the engineering and design of these structures to be able to give their kind of feedback and experience with how the river really worked. In phase two, we looked at 4 diversion installations. Initially, we were going to do a 5-year reassessment, but actually have gone back and looked at our high flows during the spring and our low flows during the fall. And these assessments have really provided a baseline for future restoration projects. All right, next slide. This next slide is just a photo before and after. You'll see tarps were used. The structure was pushed up each year. On the right, you'll see a proper head gate and sluice gate that helps to dump water and clear mud, and can also lower the water level during the winter months. These, of course, are also fish friendly. So we did work with Colorado Parks and Wildlife on these initial designs to make fish passage a better option. All right, next slide. Phase 3 was more of the same. 3 additional diversions were done. These were chosen because of the single proximity kind of on one landowner's property. That way we were able to improve a larger section of the stream and the riparian. Again, sluice gates were added to alleviate excess sedimentation. The next slide will show a before of phase 3. This was a Samson diversion. Obviously, it's a fish barrier for aquatic life. It's also a hazard. Debris catches and creates issues. Diverting water properly here was just almost impossible each year. And then it also caused a lot of silt to dump beyond the drop and create issues that had to be excavated each year. The next photo is the after at high flow. So this is the Samson diversion. This is fish friendly. Stable structure and can really handle high and low flow. You'll see at the top of the photo there where you have that really nice consistent level of water to be diverted there on the right. You'll see the red and the orange wheels of the head gate and sluice gate structures. Next photo is another after at lower flow. Again, you'll see that it has that really consistent level at the top to continue to divert water during lower flows. We found that these structures, for the most part, are very low maintenance. They're fish friendly. They have actual head gates, which make our water commissioner happy. They can reduce winter ice loads, and they really do actually divert the water when you need it. All right, next slide. So after we had done some projects that came out of the Mancus Watershed plan, the Mancus Watershed group really identified that we had an incredible amount of data, and we really needed to start collecting future concerns for water specifically, and looking at tools for planning. We interviewed 64 individual stakeholders with land and water management as a priority. Drought and climate change were really the #1 concern, but aging infrastructure, again, was also a concern. And then education and planning were really close behind that and also connected to the drought and climate change concerns. All right, next slide. So out of that concern gathering, we connected with Wilton Water Group to develop a repeatable and scalable decision support tool in order to describe the current conditions within our basin and evaluate future alternatives. We really wanted to represent the current basin characteristics, the data availability, but also look at gaps, and then to use that in later phases for a planning effort around drought contingency or comparative analysis. These tools can be used in 2 main ways. First, in understanding the drivers that influence your current basin, in the consumptive uses, irrigation practices, and system operations. The second way is really to explore how the system would change under varying conditions, including changes in hydrology, climate demands, so population increases, or irrigation practices. We can also look at basin operation changes or the basin administration changes. All right, next slide. So in order to understand kind of the uses in the Mancus River, it was important for us to understand the connection between the diversions and the irrigated acreage and our reservoir operations. So this map here shows the location of the ditch head gates and their associated irrigated acreage. It also provides an overview of the reservoir operations in the Mancus River Valley. The majority of consumptive water use in the Mancus River Valley is irrigation for agriculture. So it really was essential for us to accurately represent the irrigated acreage and the associated crop type, irrigation method, and then associate those with the diversion sites and canals. At that point, when we initially started, the total irrigated acreage was around 11,300 acres, and this was the information that we started with. All right, next slide. So Wilson Water Group then worked with our Mancus Water Commissioner and the Mancus Water Conservancy District and our local landowners to review the irrigated acreage for the Mancus River Valley. An additional 1,000 acres of irrigated land was identified, and the field boundary delineation was updated for about 2,500 of those acres. And then the ditch assignments were corrected for approximately 3,100 acres. So 3,100 acres of irrigated land was actually being assigned on the state website to the wrong ditch company.
So, is that how many irrigated acres you actually have in the Mancus Valley?
No, so we have the 11,300 plus the additional 1,000 that we found. So about 12,300. And 3,100 of that was assigned to the wrong irrigation company. So updating the irrigated acreage was a significant effort on our part and really resulted in a more accurate representation of the irrigation demands from the 49 active ditches that we have in the Mancus Valley. We were very careful to only look at the ditch level for the water rights because most of the ditch companies in Mancus are not mutual ditch companies, and so we just looked at the ditch level of water rights and did not look at individual water rights. Next slide. So as with most snowmelt basins in Colorado, there's a mismatch between the timing of runoff and when crops really need the water. So this graph shows the average monthly crop irrigation requirements and then the average monthly natural flows. So if man was not here, what would the river flows look like for the Mancus River? So this mismatch in timing can cause shortages to our crops' consumptive uses, but also shows really the importance of our storage. All right, next slide. So this graph here, in order to understand the current status of our basin, it was important to understand the needs of agriculture and how water is used by irrigators. We took a representative year, 2015, which had cooler temperatures and was really one of the wettest irrigation seasons on record. So these two climate factors helped to reduce the overall crop irrigation requirements. So this was kind of that beautiful picture year of when crop requirements should be met. And so even though 2015 was kind of that average year for runoff, it really is important to understand for us that our ag producers see some shortages every single year, and so that we were not going into this modeling process assuming that we had a full supply available. All right, next slide. In this graph, we've switched from consumptive use to diversions, and it really highlights kind of the source of diversions. So when diversions are diverting from natural flows, when they're diverting from return flows, or when they're diverting from reservoir storage. Again, during 2015, which was kind of that average runoff year by volume, we had kind of a delayed peak. Reservoir storage, again, was needed in July, August, and September. You'll see that there. And then return flows contributed a significant amount of water to the diversions in August. About 81% of the flow was return flows from those diversions. We have really great diversion records in Mancus. Other districts are not so fortunate. Our water commissioner does visit the 49 different diversions weekly. So this really gave us confidence in the information that Aaron Wilson was collecting to create this model. All right, next slide. Looking at a dry year, obviously 2012 is still in a lot of our memories. The additional supply from the reservoir helped to generate these return flows, which could be rediverted downstream. But the diversion increased from 81% of natural flow during the representative average year to 130% of the natural flow during the representative dry year. Again, highlighting the reliance on both return flows and storage And really what this showed us was how agriculture really contributes positively to the stream. All right, next slide. So our current projects, we're currently working on a stream management plan phase 1. We are continuing with that outreach and concern gathering and interviewing landowners on stream and climate and drought concerns. We have finalized our model and are going to start asking that model questions. What happens if drought years get more consistent? What happens if the reservoir fills to a certain percent? What happens if we have a wildfire and we aren't able to fill our reservoir for a year or divert as much water into our reservoir? So we'll start asking that model those questions and start being able to kind of prepare those future ideas around what our hydrology might look like in different scenarios. We're looking at legal options for water right holders, specifically around sharing of water, leasing of water, and then just possible options around operations for Jackson. The number one concern for our stream management plan and objective was the protection of current water rights. And so we did not want to infringe on any current water right with anything that we were recommending out of a stream management plan. We're also working through the town reach on recreational opportunities. We just received our final report from our engineer. It has been split into 3 sections. One with land that the town of Mancus owns. One portion is working with the school district and their outdoor classroom. And then the third piece is kind of downtown, just corporate landowners that have a section of that Mancus as well, the Mancus River. Recreational opportunities and access to the river for recreation, playing and fishing and some of those things also came out of our concern gathering report that we did. And then we're looking at creating a coordinated monitoring plan, again going back to that 319 impairment and the issues on the East Mancus and how can we coordinate watershed-wide with the U.S. Forest Service, the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, and Mesa Verde National Park on how monitoring is happening for water quality purposes in the Mancus Valley. All right, next slide. We are also continuing to work with ditch companies in converting open ditch to pipeline. We were successful in helping 2 ditch companies require Bureau of Reclamation salinity funding and are working on their habitat replacement plans, NEPA and engineering and construction with them, and continuing to improve those diversion structures and make it easier for agricultural producers to access their water. All right, next slide. We're also looking at forestry and pre-fire planning opportunities that I mentioned earlier. We do have some areas that we need fire mitigation performed on, attending RMRI and working with RMRI and Dwarf, and looking again at modeling. Here we have been very successful in our hydrology modeling, and what would some of the modeling look like around pre-fire assessments, soil erosion, possible structures that could be put into place prior to a wildfire, specifically looking at infrastructure that would be pretty significant if it was lost due to wildfire or runoff. All right, next slide. And then soil health. We are a soil conservation district, and soil we feel like is one of those natural resources that is highly connected to water. And specifically the ability for soil to hold that water and keep that water capacity. And so we want to continue our outreach to landowners, farmers, and ranchers on soil health practices and may have some opportunities in the next 3 years with the state to do that on a higher level. Next slide. So we do not do all of this alone. So just quickly, here's a list of a few partners that we've worked with over the last few years on many of these projects, and we'll continue to work with these partners. A lot of them are active members of the Mancus Watershed Group as well. All right, next slide. All right, I think I got it in 25 minutes, hopefully. All right. Thank you so much for having me here today. This is just a snapshot of a lot of the really great work that's been going on in the Mancus Valley, and we know drought is coming. It's obvious this year for sure, and so planning moving forward I think is really going to be essential to keeping our values of our agricultural heritage and that are in the valley. So thanks. Any
I definitely
questions?
think the drought's here.
Yes.
I don't think it's coming. It's definitely here, and there's not a lot of water and a lot of storage areas around the area.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, do you have any?
The one that came to mind is, do you see much metal loading in the river,
We do in the East Mancus.
in the east?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, in the east. We have quite a few mines that are up in the headwaters of the East Mancus. And so we have high copper and selenium. This year when CDPHE published their report, there was a pretty high concentration of aluminum as well. And we see those in water samples all the way down at the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. So it is traveling from the headwaters all the way down.
Joel, this is your neck of the woods. What have you got?
I've never seen the Mancus River look like it does right now. Usually it's bank to bank this time of year, and down at the lower end around Copenhagen's you can step across it. So I've never seen it that low.
I know our weed department has done some work on the Mancus River, and I am seeing some phreatophytes in these pictures. Is there talks of ongoing remediation for these Russian olives?
Yes, so we try to connect our landowners with the county weed department. In 2012, the Conservation District did also partner and remove quite a bit of the Russian olive and tamarisk through the valley. So some of those pictures may be a little bit older than that.
Okay.
And there are still a few. Part of our stream management plan is doing what we call rapid stream riparian assessments for private landowners that own land along the river. And part of that assessment is identifying non-natives and invasives and then making recommendations for removal. I will also say in tours that we had 2 years ago down on some of the tribal lands too, they do also have issues with mostly tamarisk as well, and are really trying to fight that and mitigate that as well.
On this graph, the green represents diversion from reservoir storage. So, pardon my ignorance, but it appears if we're not storing it in the reservoir, we're diverting it to somewhere else. How does that work? What does that mean in layman's terms?
So the green shows the diversions that happen when water is released out of the reservoir.
Okay.
And so if we don't have a reservoir, then it's the dotted red line, which would be the natural flow, which would be no diversions at all.
So that's water that's in place of the natural flow because it was stored. Okay.
That's if so the dotted line is if the reservoir was not here to to divert and capture the water.
Right.
That dotted line would be what our runoff and what our stream would look like naturally.
And this is what it looks like because of.
The diversion, and then the red is from return flows.
Great.
So when you're talking in your riparian area, what is that actually? That first 15 feet or 20 feet, I think it is that the real heavy, the big stuff, and then you got to another 40 feet, I believe, which encompasses like 55 or 60 feet total in that riparian area. Is that still a basic number that is used in Mancus or around the
It depends on the site. So the way that we work the rapid stream riparian assessments depends on where the stream bank kind of meets. Some of the stream is more in size, and so we don't use just a flat number necessarily. It really depends where you're going to get that bank kind of overflow and where that natural kind of rise is at, and it is highly variable the whole way along the Mancus River. It looks very, very different kind of throughout the entire valley.
So it's not necessarily a number because they, trying to think of the last one I read was probably from the U.S. Forest Service. They actually have numbers that they kind of put in there, and which I understand that. I mean, the flatter it is, the wider the mouth is. It opens up. It could go out 60, 70, I mean, could go out 100 feet, I guess.
Right, so we use survey equipment at the different sites to take those measurements. And then that's all loaded into a spreadsheet to calculate, and it can calculate minimum stream flows, it can calculate current stream flows, but that's all kind of loaded into a spreadsheet to determine that.
Okay. All right. Gentlemen?
I'm good.
All
I
right.
want to
Well,
thank you very much.
thank you
Yeah,
for
thank
having
you.
me here today. I really appreciate your time and being able just to kind of give you an update on what's going on in Mancus. If you'd like to know about future meetings, I'd be happy to put you on our event email list or our future Watershed meetings as well to kind of keep up on some of the projects I mentioned that'll be moving forward in the next few years.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rank. Appreciate it. Ken, do you have anything to add?
No, we're just looking for more snow, but it's not there.
Thought you may be able to.
I thought you were going to bring snow today, Gretchen.
Yeah, I know.
Well, actually, it snowed.
Believe me.
It snowed on me Saturday at Groundhog, so, I mean, not a lot, but
Not a lot.
it
Not a
did
lot.
snow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the road's open from what I understand.
It is.
So,
It's wide open.
and the drive up looks pretty dry,
It's
from as far as I went.
very dry.
Yeah. So we've still got high elevation stuff, but reports around the state is we're in pretty bad shape down here, which we knew. But waiting to see how it comes off, because it's still, the high elevation stuff's still stuck, but the low elevation didn't make much. It was gone long ago. Didn't make much runoff.
Kind of evaporation percentage you're looking at?
Well, it's a lot like last year. We're not totally sure where that goes. In other words, we know the soil was dry, so it filled that up. Then we've had some wind, had a little heat, and so it's, we had 34% of what should have come off last year for 100% snow last year. That gets it a gross efficiency. And so somewhere in there is the soil moisture and the evaporation losses. We don't have a great handle on how to differentiate the, sorry. So yeah, it's a little tough to differentiate how much of it was evaporation, how much just went into the ground. When you talk evaporation, it could be the trees, ET, evapotranspiration, or it could just be the wind, dry, up into the atmosphere. But either way, the conditions and all just made for poor runoff last year, and we're looking for the same this year, unfortunately. Probably a little lower than last year.
Ouch.
Yeah, snow was a little bit less. But, yeah, with the low snow disappearing, I mean, I hear there's snow at Groundhog. Groundhog up.
Yeah, Groundhog up, two right there at the lake. There are a few patches and spots, but
So you don't see
Pretty
much
minimal.
below 9,500 feet. And in other words, that upper end of our snow, about 20% of our area. It makes about 40%. But how it comes down over the next 60 days will make a lot of difference. And yeah, the river went up and now it's settled back after the storm. And so we're just watching at this point. Doesn't look good though.
Not much you can do, sit there and watch it.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of storms in the horizon. Hopefully it doesn't get too windy and bring it down. We'll count it up.
We doing any cloud seeding?
Not anymore.
When we have clouds?
I mean, we had storms this year, but they sure didn't yield much.
Yeah.
How many times did anybody plow? You talked about shoveling.
Yeah.
Once, twice?
My house, it was like every other day. On Mesa Verde, we caught every storm that went through there.
See, and this west end didn't do as good as, Rio Grande's actually one of the best in the States.
Yeah.
And it gets better as you go north. Gunnison's pretty tough, but Colorado River's not too bad in Yampa. The other thing is, the only other thing we had going for us, we do have a little soil moisture down low. Most of the farmers reporting right now, if they can get some water on something, there's still some groundwater. And of course, I'm sure you're seeing stuff green up. So a little bit better down low this year, but that was the only small silver lining. So that's where we're at, and obviously everybody's grappling with water numbers. Going to be a tough year. So,
I think so.
yeah.
All right, thank you, Kim. Anything else?
Mike's off. Gretchen, how do you, have you worked previously with the town of Mancus on any of the conservation projects? And just for the sake of educating us, what does that relationship look like? Please.
Please.
Sure, so I had a workshop with the town of Mancus actually last Wednesday to talk about the recreational opportunities through town. One of the other issues that was identified kind of there at Cottonwood Park during the spring runoff of 19 when we had that amazing runoff, there was some bank stabilization issues, and a big chunk kind of the bank there in the park fell away, and somebody's dog almost went in the river, and it got really close to kind of the path there. So out of our concern gathering, a lot of that was identified, and so our engineer put together a proposal for the town of Mancus, not only on recreational opportunities, but creating safety areas and bank stabilization, along with creating kind of some of those recreational opportunities. Creating pools for fish. They used to stock that. Again, that's probably going to depend on water for sure, because you don't want to put fish in a stream where you may not have water availability. But that relationship has been really great. The town of Mancus has been highly supportive. They've been an active member of our Watershed group and are also actively talking kind of within the Watershed group about some of this pre-fire planning and kind of our municipal water and some of those conversations as well. One of the Mancus Conservation District board members is also one of the town trustees and the mayor pro tem, Fred Brooks. So we have really just a really great relationship there, and Heather Alvarez and I speak quite often, and I'll be working with them in any capacity that they need around drought contingency planning as well for the town.
And do you see any legislative issues that you believe the BOCC should be rejecting or opposing?
So, I mean, I don't know if you've heard of the PAWS Act, some of those. I'm sure you're probably even more aware of some of those than I am. We did support the soil health bill that will be hopefully coming before the Senate here shortly. And certainly, want to advocate for soil health. Yeah, that's, I guess, the one that came to mind immediately that could just really cripple agriculture in Colorado.
It's obviously it's a ballot initiative, which they have to gather the 125 plus or whatever it is, 1,000 signatures,
Yeah.
which is going to be, that's not difficult in the state of Colorado,
Sure.
specifically in the Front Range. But we will obviously oppose that, and we'll be putting out some more information on that. I actually have hopefully a video, or we'll get a video out pretty quickly on that ballot initiative. But while we're speaking about it here, I think that's it's not a legislative issue when it's a ballot initiative.
Yeah,
So a
it goes to
ballot
the people.
initiative, to all of the people out there that don't understand it, it just takes the required signatures to get it on a ballot, and then it goes to the vote of the people. So it's not like legislation where it has
Right.
to be gone through and amended or PI'd,
Yeah.
postponed indefinitely through the legislation process. It's actually just somebody came up with something, put it on a ballot
Yeah.
with the required signatures, and that's how we ended up with Proposition 114,
Yeah.
which is another issue that we're still having to face and deal with now.
Yeah.
So, we will definitely be opposing that for a lot of reasons. It's not, I mean, there is a lot in there that's,
It's
somebody-
going to take a lot of education. I think a big piece of that will be educating the voters for sure.
right,
Yeah,
and we have a short time to do that.
for sure, yeah. So the Mancus Conservation District can't lobby as a special district, but we do connect with the Colorado Association of Conservation Districts, which is our lobbying organization. And so I'd be happy to pass on any legislative information from that entity to you if you'd like to kind of see what conservation districts at the state level have set as policy for them to either lobby for or against legislation. I'd be happy to
Okay.
connect you with that. Yeah,
That'd be
Yes.
good to see.
okay. Any other questions?
All right.
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Do you have, I see Ed and/or Dawn on Zoom chat. Can you unmute them or?
They can hear us and they can unmute themselves, yeah.
Dawn or Ed, do you have anything, any questions you'd like to ask or comments?
I'll defer to Don if he does, and I have a brief report on the Colorado River District meeting I heard this morning, but that's about all I would have to add.
No, I appreciated the presentation from Gretchen, and thanks for being able to listen in. But I don't have comments nor prepared stuff to bring to you guys at the moment.
Okay. Well, I guess then, go ahead.
I do have a report from the River District. This is the River District is the counterpart to Southwest Water Conservation District, and they cover like 2/3 of the West Slope, so they are quite powerful. And I do listen to their meetings. Andy Miller is their GM, and he is a very eloquent, well-informed speaker. They did talk about demand management and water asset management today, and that was a very interesting conversation. Some of the news is that Water Asset Management has acquired 2 more farms in Grand Valley Water User Association in recent weeks. One of them is quite large, and Director Aquafresco, who represents Mesa County, is becoming deeply concerned that Water Asset Management is already the largest shareholder in Grand Valley Water User Association, and if they continue on their current path, there certainly is a path where they may become the majority shareholder and they can do what they will at that point. They discussed the demand management framework that CWCB has started circulating. I think we're going to talk about it again at the roundtable meetings, which are on Thursday, at the DCP meeting before the main meeting. Andy talked about it at some length, and he's echoed concerns that have been expressed by me in Southwest that it is a weighty document. It has a lot of words in it, but it's kind of short on substance. And it's not really what most people are expecting in the framework, because it doesn't really outline how they would set up the demand management program. And he's quite concerned that somebody is going to have to start putting together a real framework pretty soon, and the River District is maybe going to do it because so far CWCB hasn't. Director Curry from Gunnison expressed concerns about the fact that there's a 500,000 acre foot demand management pool in Powell, and it is not sufficient to make any tangible difference in the situation in the Colorado River, especially the current situation. And Andy Mueller echoed that concern. He's told CWCB 3 times in person, and he's told them in writing, and he's expressed to them that they are willing to participate in a demand management program if it will make a difference. But the size of the current pool is insufficient to make a difference. So there is a definite impasse between doing something and having all the overhead and the friction and the tension, but it won't actually make a difference on the river. Director Aquafresco expressed the concern that he doesn't think that demand management is viable in its current form, and he basically asked them to stop investing so much time and money on it and redirect their resources elsewhere. So I've heard the same thing from the Southwest meeting. Charlie Smith basically said that their framework is a lot of words, but it doesn't just really have any substance to it. And at this point, they put 2.5 years in it, and they're not really any closer to doing anything about the current situation. So at some point, they got to start doing something that's going to make a difference, or put up or shut up. So it was a very important conversation. And again, River District is very powerful and well-spoken, and CWCB does listen to them. And I guess the last thing that came out is Director Aquafresca expressed the concern, which some people disagree with, that water asset management is targeting Grand Valley because CWCB is standing up a demand management program and trying to establish water markets, and that Grand Valley Water Users Association was the biggest participant in the pilot program. And he is a little bit frustrated that the participation in the demand management program may be encouraging and facilitating this. Others disagree that it would have made no difference at all. But Andy Miller expressed concern that he has, again, expressed this concern to CWCB, and they are very concerned that these demand management activities are creating water markets in and of their own right. And if they do stand up a program, they have to come up with a mechanism to discourage hedge funds and water speculators from taking advantage of it and using it to buy up farms and ranches to sell the water off. So these are many of the concerns I've already expressed to you, and I just want to make sure that I'm not the only one saying this, that the River District is saying many of the same things. So it was a very important conversation, and I'll try to get the video out when it's available so you can listen to it yourself. And that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ed. All right. Well, with that, I appreciate you guys coming in, and the report, Gretchen, and pray for rain.
Yeah.
Pray for rain. With that, we'll go ahead on to the rest of our meeting, and then we have until 3 o'clock. We don't have Empire Electric coming in, correct, Shaq? So I guess we'll go ahead and go to our attorney's report.
Thank you guys for coming in.
Yeah, thank you all. Yeah.
Okay.
Our CO2 case, which is our offshoot of Kidner Morgan, is at the Court of Appeals. Last week, the CO2 committee attorney filed their response with the Court of Appeals. We should get a ruling from the Court of Appeals in a month or two on how that's going to progress. So that's in limbo now, but there's nothing else to do other than sit here and wait and see how the Court of Appeals rules on that. Our Weber Canyon Road case, PAX is what we call it, PAX is the name of the LLC, down there on Weber Canyon Road. That case is set for a status in a couple weeks, that first week of May. And maybe, hopefully, that'll be our last court appearance, and it will go away at that point. I mean, we have been told that they are going to withdraw their claims against us. We made counterclaims, so there are some things to still resolve, such as during the pendency, the duration of this case, a lot of fence was built right on the road. So there's still some things to resolve, but those were our claims against them. They're the ones who initially sued us and brought this thing to court, initially claiming it wasn't a road, and I think that might have even been before Commissioner Candelaria's time. And so we're, I think, nearing the end of that case, at least in trial court, until or unless it might get appealed. They did at our last court appearance, which was a couple weeks ago, say that they might not appeal it. They were reconsidering that because they already have a ruling against them, and they indicated that they would likely appeal it, and they were just waiting to tie up all of our loose ends down here. I think that's about all I have to report. You know, one thing I don't really have much to report on, but I might reach back out to the firm in Denver, Kutak Rock, that is representing the man down on Road Y with the closed gate. Right, and you know, we said fine, we'll keep it on hold as long as that gate stays open, and it is wired open still. And you guys do your assessment and get back to us. I think we gave them everything that we had weeks ago for them to assess, and haven't heard back from them. So I'll probably reach out to them this week and say what's going on. just to see whether or not we feel like we need to go ahead and take any more action, or listen to what they were gonna say. So I think that's it.
Okay. You guys have any other questions for John? All right.
Oh, one more thing. I just saw Don from planning. Sorry. Yep. I am blaming. I am blaming Don. So we wrote a letter to ADNF about basically P&Z land use code violations, structure that's too close to the property line, I guess, is the best case scenario, is that it's too close to the property line. That acronym, or those 4 letters, whatever they are, they're represented by a firm in Durango who contacted us, and I might have reported that to you all last week. What they reported to us, and I verified there is a court case pending in Montezuma County, is the 2 landowners are litigating this issue right now. They claim that there was a contract to buy that piece of land, therefore it won't be an issue because they'll own the entire thing and there won't be any setback issues when they own the property next to them. The other party is disputing that it was a valid contract, but they're litigating that right now. It's in court here with lots of different issues going on. It's pretty contentious, so it did make sense to me, their request to, hey, can you guys put this on the shelf for now, wait to see how the Montezuma County District Court rules, and then figure out whether or not there's even anything to enforce, because if they win, then they'll own all of it and there won't be any setback issues. So I agreed that I thought that was reasonable. So that letter I sent, we're just going to kind of sit on it for now and not do anything with it.
Okay.
And James Dietrich is on the meeting.
He's with Bobert. Yep. So he won't have anything to report as of right now. Shaq, go ahead. We're to you.
So the first thing I have is a public notice that the commissioners will be attending a meeting via Zoom, but from this room with the attorney. Just realized the mic wasn't on. So I have the public notice that the commissioners will attend a meeting with the Attorney General's office regarding settlements from opioid manufacturers. That'll be this Thursday at 2 o'clock. It will be via Zoom, but the commissioners will be here in the meeting room for that. So
I want to do that. I mean, I'll probably do it via Zoom, but
yeah, that's fine. You've got the invite, right?
Yep, I do.
So yeah, that'll be coming up, and it's not just the commissioners, it's all the law enforcement agencies, fire protection districts, all the local municipalities. So yeah, that'll be coming up. And I just want to throw this out for the commission. I know that we receive a lot of pressure to fund this and to fund that, and a lot of those things are important, and the commission usually does through our charitable contributions in each budget year include funding for things. But I think it's important to remember that the purpose of government is to provide for defense and to provide for commerce. And so if it doesn't apply to those things, then there are certain things that have to be moved to the bottom of the priority list. And I don't see that racetracks are providing for defense or for interstate commerce or for, I don't want to downplay what the racetrack provided for our businesses, especially during the shutdowns. I think that was incredibly important, shouldn't be overlooked. But the purpose of government is to provide for defense, provide for commerce, and then stay out of people's lives. And so I think we need to stick to our constitutional roots when it comes to that, and remind the commission that with your funding priorities, we've got deputies and other employees that are asking for raises. That was brought up in public comment. And we've had a lot of pressure since I've been in here to do something about the mental health and substance abuse problems that we're facing here. So when you have to consider your funding priorities, I'd ask you to consider those things. That'll conclude my report.
And I want to say one more thing, too. So statutorily in Colorado, the language is health, safety, welfare. Those things, which might be a little bit more broad. I completely endorse what Mr. Powers said, and I'm a strong advocate for limited government. Maybe even stronger than Mr. Powers, I don't know. But I do think the statute provides for slightly broader language, which is health, safety, welfare, whatever that means.
Okay. Well, obviously that statement can become very broad, but thank you, Shat. We'll go to the commissioner's report from there.
James came in.
Oh. James? Dietrich, come on up. Thank you for jumping on that Zoom meeting with Representative Boebert, or Congresswoman Boebert, I'm sorry.
Well, gentlemen, maybe we should wait for Commissioner Lindsay here. Okay. So yes, I did just get off the call with Congresswoman Boebert. I think she is really covering a lot of the things that are pretty pressing issues for us in Montezuma County, and of course, for the nation also. She's really on top of the 30 by 30 project. And of course, there are many, many more questions that are coming up associated with that. But it sounds like there's going to be a push to get that introduced next week. So she's ramping up her efforts to combat that. Also addressing some of the issues that we've got on the southern border. I think the immigration situation seems to be spiraling out of control. She's very concerned about that, as I think we all are, and is working to find some solutions on that. Some of the other things that we talked about was some of the regulation that may be coming out through the EPA, particularly concerning CO2, regulating that as a criteria pollutant, and possibly moving into regulating ozone as a way of handling that, because the CO2 is pretty difficult technically to measure and to actually regulate. But the back door on that is possibly by using regulation on the ozone. So that'll be something that we need to continue to monitor, and also some stuff on the waters of the United States. And thanks to Ed for pointing some of this out, and we were able to raise that with Congresswoman Boebert also. Also, the new Green Deal is on her radar screen. Obviously, going to have some opposition to that. And also, the Western Waters. So she's got some legislation in the works that's designed to help provide protections to Western Waters. And she's also working very hard to try to keep the BLM located in Grand Junction. So many of the things we covered today are all things that we've talked about in here in the past.
Are they still really considering moving that?
It sounds like it. Sounds like there's still pressure to kind of get it out of back to Washington.
Because it's only been there 2 years, a year
Right.
and a half?
Yeah, it's just brand new up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, apparently there's still the effort to move it back to Washington. So anyway, that kind of concludes what we talked about with Congresswoman Boebert, but she did mention that she is planning to do these type of roundtable discussions on a more regular basis, and it was good to see that most of Western Slope was well represented. We had a lot of commissioners that were on the call. When a commissioner couldn't make it, they usually had somebody like me show up to listen in. So anyway, I anticipate more of this, and I'll try to get on as many as I can. Also, sat in on the Colorado Water Congress discussion on last Monday. The focus of the discussion was on the inclusivity and equity. And so basically what it was about was just trying to get more voices in on decision making for our water resources. And so they're putting a lot of effort into particularly, bringing in people of color. But CWCB mentioned that they're aware of about 400 stakeholders that they regularly interact with and work with. But what they really intend to do is to reach out to the other 5 million that they don't have conversations with. Some good news there and some bad news too, so it just depends on, where people come down, and how well they can actually muddy the waters up, in some respects. So CWCB has created a committee to look at the equity inclusion. The meetings will begin this summer. They've got 3 focal points that they want to improve on. One is they want to increase their presence on their website and their ability to use that website to influence people. They also want to make sure that when they're hosting events that there will be special focus placed on equity inclusion. So I'm sure that the invites will be broader than they have been in the past. And also they want to stay aware of what everybody else is doing out there so the efforts are not duplicated, or where they can provide support where a good effort is started and they think that they can advance that. They provided some updates from organizations and businesses that are doing some of this type of work. One was the Young Farmers, which is a group at CSU. They're mainly funded through grants working on ag efficiency in urban areas, and also things like increasing irrigation efficiency, things like that. And they're also really active in trying to recruit people of color into the ag industry. So all that's probably pretty good stuff by and large. Then Gei Consultants, and this is an engineering firm. This is a private business. And they're really working on some of the same things, but they also have a project that's they focus their projects on equity-based type projects. So anyway, that was where we're at with CWCB. Then also had a conversation with Mr. Ralph Wegner, and Mr. Wegner is the gentleman who is advancing the irrigation water for the hospital district. He put me in touch with an engineer at KDI Hydro Systems, who is the consulting engineer for the water district, for the hospital district. So what they're going to do is prepare a proposal for additional design consultation to evaluate the feasibility of bringing MVI water down Mildred Road and then west along Driscoll to supply that irrigation water to the county properties there. So I'll be waiting to hear what kind of proposal we get from him. So if it looks like it's feasible, then he will prepare an additional proposal, which would include the construction drawings and things of that nature. So in other words, we don't want to advance this too far unless it looks like it's feasible for us to go in that direction. So let's see. Also wanted to report that the BLM has opened up their museum up there at the Cultural Heritage Center. It's open on a limited basis. Visitor centers are still not open with the federal agencies at this time. Then the last thing I've got is regarding the summit access for the new BLM parking lot that they're planning to put in up there. They are the BLM is asking the county if we would consider providing a donation of gravel for that parking lot and also the entry road going up to it, which is about I scaled it off. It looks about 400 feet or so.
I think that when we had discussed that, and this is going to be pre-you guys, when we had Robin here, we had, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shaq or John, but that 400 feet that turns off at 35.6 that goes back to the west in that 60-foot right-of-way, I think Rob said that he could take care of that in 2 days total and get it gravelled all the way up there, because there is already a lot of gravel there. So it's going to be
Certainly
a very insignificant cost to us for that section. But obviously now with 2 new commissioners to provide gravel for that parking lot, it's going to be a decision now that you guys have to make. What kind of tonnage are they asking for, or?
So they haven't got to that part yet, and so what I was going to advise them is that they need to finalize their drawings, get their plans fully put together, come in and make a presentation to the commissioners to update the commissioners on where they're at with it, and then to make that request themselves. Because I don't want to be in here making a request for the BLM for gravel on their facility.
We were also
done that in the past, but
we were also waiting for the survey of that property before Rob could get in there. But if we do have that finalized, I would just soon put that on his radar so that he can get that whenever he can.
Certainly.
To that, wherever that gate's going to be, and then that way we are our portion of that's completed. We found the right-of-way. We'll get that 400 feet of roadway fixed to where it's passable, and then we'll talk to Miss Connie and say, now it's time for you to do your part.
Certainly.
And I think they've been very good.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah,
think they're gonna-
certainly they
I
have.
think they're gonna move forward with it as rapidly as possible, but, yeah, I think we kinda have to know what we're gonna contribute.
Absolutely. Yeah, so they need to come in and give us some hard figures on that. I just wanted to let the commissioners know that it's coming, and I'll let Rob know too, that they're moving along with it. And it's probably gonna be sooner versus later. It sounds like they're making some real progress up there. So,
Okay. So you'll communicate that with Rob?
yeah, yes, correct.
Okay.
And then, gentlemen, I think that's all I had for the day, unless we've got something else to cover. No funding requests from me today, fortunately, so.
You just prepared us for a funding request.
Well, yes, I was doing that. Yeah, I try to let you know when something's coming, and it looks like it will be
Yeah.
coming sooner versus later, so. Yeah. Okay,
All right.
thank you,
James,
gentlemen.
I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, James.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, Commissioners report. Who wants to go first, to my left or right?
I'll go first. Had a meeting, zoomed in with the meeting with City of Cortez. They're having a lot of discussion over their city manager and went into executive session quite a bit of the meeting, but they did reject a, what do I want to say?
Proposal?
No, it's not a proposal or a law. Ordinance, there we go. An ordinance to require business owners in the city of Cortez to have their walks shoveled within 12 hours of snowfall. So it's back to 24 hours. Other than that, did some liquor licenses and stuff like that. Pretty much housekeeping things. Also, I met with the Montezuma County Hospital District, and as James was just discussing, I went to see what, if we could make this agreement or make this happen. So they're gonna study it, we're gonna study it, so we're gonna study it. See if we can't get a little bit of ditch water down to do landscaping down maybe at the sheriff's office and the combined courts facility. They're coming down Mildred, and so we won't have to cross conservation easement, so we'll see what the cost is before we do this. Their pipeline holds, I want to say, 8 shares of water. They're going to put 5 in, and so that leaves 3 that we can put in there. And I think with what we've got, 3 shares will, especially under pressure, will do what needs to be done.
Is there pressure on that line?
They're going to put a pump on it.
Oh, they are going to?
Yeah, they're going to put a pump on it. So they're going to pressure it up and run all their sprinkler zones different times, and so I think there's going to be plenty of water in that pipeline. It's a 3-inch line, so it's pretty good, pretty good. Also, while I was there, I didn't find out, but I received a call the next day that Tony Suddeth had resigned, and Rick Schrader is now the interim CEO at the hospital, and they are also looking for a CEO now. So, and then my phone blew up the other day about a racetrack, as well as I'm sure other people did. And not only my phone, but my email, and probably if I had a fax machine, that would have come to life. So we did a lot of question answering over the weekend. And I did have opportunity to see one of my sort of adopted kids that hung around the house get married down in Phoenix. And let me tell you what, they're putting Colorado water to good use down there.
Great.
Commissioner Stevenson. Thank you, Kent.
Well, I attended the Mancus Town Board meeting on Wednesday night, and it was a short meeting. They appointed Miss Donna Murphy as their new town treasurer, and they reappointed 4 members to their P&Z board. They also adopted the Montezuma County Hazard Mitigation Plan that evening. And then I had talked to them about giving them $100,000 for their water project, and they feel that that is covered, but they would like to use it for their fiber if that's, that's another infrastructure thing that I think that money can be used for, so.
The ARP funding.
The ARP funding, yes.
And the ARP funding is the American Rescue Plan that Montezuma County will be receiving just as soon as they get all of the
Treasury guidelines.
Treasury guidelines, which we are getting bits and pieces of those daily.
And then I spent a lot of time just researching bills and stuff, and then, like you said, Sunday afternoon, my phone and everything blowed up about the racetrack out there and all of the rumors that got started about it. So I spent a lot of time focused on that this weekend.
Okay, very good. Wednesday afternoon, I finished up with the noxious weed video and our director, Bonnie Loving. Thursday, I had a Zoom meeting with, let me see what they actually call themselves. It was a Front Range Passenger Rail Conversation. And basically, this is coming from Senate Bill 238, which is coming out of Congress. And this is for the rail district that they're planning on proposing that will basically run down the I-25 corridor. It'll stretch all the way from Wyoming up by Cheyenne, all the way down, eventually past Trinidad. Which is part of going to be that huge infrastructure bill. We then had a discussion on Senate Bill 21-1117 on Friday, discussing the amendments before they got to the governor. As they stood without the amendments, he was going to veto that bill, which is basically due to housing and how it could or could not affect our housing authority down here, but housing is big on his radar right now. Saturday, I actually enjoyed the day off. Sunday, like you gentlemen, my phone also blew up, but only blew up after I enjoyed a very pleasant day out at the Louis Areola Center for their annual fundraiser. Great turnout. They sold a lot of pies, and the pies were, they did well.
They done very well.
They did very well. It was pleasant to see that. That community really comes together out there. Monday was spring break for the Mighty Dozen, so we didn't have a meeting Monday night. Yesterday in our workshop, we had our workshop. We met with, get my notes here, Joel, and you can kind of chime in here too. We had Elizabeth Marsh from SCAPE, who is a 501c3 nonprofit investment fund, gave us a presentation and was asking for a letter of support for SCAPE. And I don't know if you have that ready for us, Shaq, or not.
Right here.
And Joel, you can chime in on this, I mean, anytime you want. It holds Montezuma County liable for nothing. You know, her presentation was short and sweet. I do think they do a lot for some of the smaller entrepreneurial people trying to get into business around here. So basically, I'm bringing it up to you gentlemen. Do you guys want to sign this letter of support, or do we want to pass on it?
I think we signed a letter of support. It's a good thing for the county.
Okay, so do you want to put that in a form of?
If I can find out what we're.
It would just be a letter of support for SCAPE, and it'll be sent to Emily Miller, the acting OID director, and the.
I move that we sign a letter of support for SCAPE and send it to Emily Miller, the acting OID director from Montezuma County.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to sign a letter of support for SCAPE. And that letter will be sent to Emily Miller, the acting OID director, in Washington, D.C. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Secondly, out of our workshop, we had an update of the changes of the mission of Senate Bill 181, which basically deals with all of the regulations that were passed in 2019 and signed on 4/16 of 19 by Governor Polis. And this basically has to do with all of the oil and gas. And John Mesner, who was a county commissioner in Gunnison County, is now the new commissioner up there, and basically updated us from series 200 to 1200 series on the changes, and more will be coming. And then I went home and answered more phone calls Monday night on the racetrack, and then again this morning. And then we had our meeting in here about that. Unless I missed anything else that we needed to bring up for a signature shack, that will also conclude my report.
That's the letter of support
Okay.
that you're holding. That's the letter of support.
Do you have a signature line for all of us?
Yeah, right across the bottom. Otherwise, I'd have to make it 2 pages just for the signature line.
Okay, and with that, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we will wait for the Board of Empire Electric to show up, and we're going to have a discussion with Empire Electric. So